All right, guys. Looks like Instagram is online. We have Facebook online, and YouTube is still sending data. Danny Koyman, good evening. Jay Colley, how are you? So Bailey Horner, welcome. Caleb Newton, how you doing, bud? So everything's just kind of coming up online. So we'll give it a little bit for people to jump in. But I missed you guys last week. So kind of odd not broadcasting live. So Danny Koyman, Instagram is no, Facebook. So kind of got people jumping in all over. Caleb, great, glad to be here. Perpetual Wanderer, Stephen Anderson. Ooh, we got a bunch of people jumping in from YouTube now too. Michael Hamilton, Larry Bennett, and Matthew Flowers from YouTube. Welcome, welcome. Andrew Pierce from Facebook. Nacho Libre, for once I'm on time. Welcome, buddy. Keaton Chancellor, good evening. Jay Tappan, glad you're back. Had to spend the week in therapy. Jay, I was kind of spending last week in therapy too. In fact, it's funny. My wife told me last week that even with the anesthesia and the narcotic painkillers, she was like, maybe you should just go ahead and broadcast. It might be kind of one of the more entertaining ones, because I guess when I came out of anesthesia, I was saying some pretty hilarious stuff that she was cracking up on. So, Jay, how are you feeling? You know, still painful, but we're hanging in there. We're healing slowly and getting better with each day. So, baby George Outdoors, hello from South Dakota. So, Danny, no, I have not shot a triax yet. I found a bunch of them for sale online, but I just haven't been able to get my hands on one here in the valley to shoot one. So, but I'll tell you what, the verdicts in the triax shoot, or the verdicts in the traverse, man, I don't know. I mean, axle to axle on those, and string length and angle, they're pretty sweet. So, Ron Thomas, Michael Hamilton, I missed you too. I wasn't able to listen while on my weekly drive from Spokane to Ellensburg. I know, guys. I'm sorry. So, Lucas Bush, Bill Berry, Jim Hargrove finally made a live Q&A. Welcome, bud. Scott, I'm actually home tonight. I figured you'd be up sitting on your bear bait there, Scott. So, Josh, did she video it? That would be funny stuff. No, she didn't, but she did think about it. So, I don't know. It was pretty interesting. My wife and a couple of the kids really were laughing at me that night, because I was hearing conversations that they were having that what I was hearing was really not what was, being taken place. So I was trying to contribute, and it just wasn't even in the same zip code as what they were talking about. So that is why thinking of selling my triax, those other two bows. Danny, I have experience with the verdicts and the traverse, not with the triax, so I can't really steer you one way or another. You just need to shoot them. So, all right, guys, we got a bunch of people in. Lena, I'm glad you're cracking up on this one tonight. In a way, I kind of wish she would have recorded it, because I would have liked to seen some of it. But then again, I don't know. That's always blackmail and ammo that she would have to hold above my head. But anyways, so, all right, let's jump into it, guys. So, or she didn't. Be careful around Christmas time. I know. Hello, everybody. My name is Michael Batiste, and this is Wapiti Wednesday Q&A. If this is your first time joining us tonight, welcome. We're glad you're here. The way Wapiti Wednesday Q&A normally works is I start with a topic, and tonight we're going to talk about selecting elk units. Now, as we kind of discuss that, it doesn't matter which platform you're joining us on, whether you're on Instagram or Facebook or YouTube. Feel free to put your comments into the chat section, and I will gladly, try to answer those questions. There is some information that I do hold back, because we do have paid one-on-one private lessons, and we also have the Patreon page with where those members pay a monthly subscription. So, but for the most part, I will be able to answer more the questions, except for some of that stuff. Also, if this is your first time here, or you're just enjoying the content we put out, make sure that you like, subscribe, or follow, and make sure that you turn on those notifications so that you're notified every time that we go live or upload a new video. So, okay, first things first, real quick, over on the Patreon page, we are only 4 patrons away from drawing a name for a dozen custom arrows from DCA Custom Arrow Works. And the way that's going to work is the winner is going to contact DCA, and you guys are going to start working towards, that custom arrow that is best for your setup. So he's going to get your bow, your draw, your poundage, all that stuff. And then he's basically going to go to his charts and find the shaft, and then he's going to come to you with 3 options. Now, you will have the ability to choose which of those options you want. Now, if you choose the upper end, I am going to cap at $250. If you choose an arrow custom setup that's above that $250, the winner will be responsible for what's above that, but I'm going to pay up to that $250 mark. So, like I said, only 4 more patrons, maybe 5 more patrons before we draw that winner. So, okay, here we go. Going up Friday, keeping activity in the area low for a few days. Nice. So, Elq Units, Eric Nelson. I picked my units like I used to pick my women at random with little success, and in the end, and I'm still skunked. So, Ghost Buck Coffee on Instagram. DCA does killer work. Yes, they do. And in fact, I had him do just a budget build for me with .006 tolerance arrows, and I'll tell you what, those things, I'm grouping like this out at 50-60 yards with an 006 arrow. So amazing on those. So okay, so the reason I wanted to talk about this tonight was since I was been down for a few days sitting on the couch, and I'm not really one to sit on the couch. I've spent a lot of time in forums and chat rooms, and I typically don't spend a lot of time in those. But I noticed a lot of people, and these are more of people that don't live out west, but this applies to a lot of people going out of state. And some of the things that I saw in the questions, just really, I felt bad for the people. First off, it was somebody went on there and they picked an area in Idaho and just said, hey, I got this area, I got this tag. We're going to be heading out at this time. What do you guys, recommend? And you could definitely tell then a lot of people were like, well, why did you choose that area? Have you researched that area? And the person goes, no, I went to Fish and Game and basically looked at the harvest statistics, and that's all they went off. They didn't do any other research past that point. And I know the area that they got, and thankfully a couple of people were like, well, you probably should have done a little bit more research, because there's a lot of private ground in that area. It's a larger area. Elk numbers are kind of low, so the elk are scattered throughout that area. And unless you have access to private property or insider information on hidden pockets, you may go out there and not even see an elk for the whole entire time you're there. And, the person that got the tag came back and said, well, yeah, but what about this high success rate? And basically the people came back and said, well, that's because there's a bunch of locals that have access to the private property, so those success numbers are kind of skewed a little bit. You might want to pick up the phone and talk to the fish and wildlife biologist in that area. So the individual did get on the phone, and all of a sudden he came back and followed up and was like, man, what do I do? This was not so. that just got me thinking that there's so many tools out there and there's so many options that so to really choose a good elk hunting area, there's a lot of different things that go into it. Yes, the statistics from Fish and Game with the number of hunters and the success rate is just one piece of the pie, but you need to do so much more homework beyond that. You really need to get to an OnX or a base map and take a look at how much of that area is private versus, public, and what's the access like to that public. And then also, pick up the phone and call those biologists. Wow, hey, I'm seeing the success rate is at this. Can you kind of tell me a little bit about the area or this or that? And they'll tell you, well, yeah, we have a lot of locals that live in this area that have access to private. And so, 85% of the elk that are harvested in this area come off private ground. Okay, so I mean, I would think, especially if you're coming from all the way back east out to a western state to hunt, that would be really some vital information that you would want. So, Andrew, outside of your comfort zone, do you look at success rate then scout it out? So, sorry guys. No, I dive a lot deeper. The success rate is just the first tip. That will get me interested in an area, but then I'm going to dive deeper into that area. I want to know more about that area. It's like I said, access, private versus public, terrain. I mean, I want to know a lot more about that. How many roads are in there? How many four-wheeler trails? All that different stuff, because that's going to give me a good idea of what it's going to be like in that area. So, I mean, if you only have one or two access points, those one or two access points are going to be pretty dang, busy. What other options do I have? Are there alternate? I mean, what if I drive 75 miles out of my way to come in from a different direction? Just try to think outside the box. Once I've checked off all those things, good success rate, got on the phone, found that there's good bull to cow ratio, good amount of public land versus private land, good access. Once I've checked all those things off, then I'm going to go on to, the e-scouting tools that I use, and then I'm going to really start dissecting that area. And then I'm going to basically break it down from that whole big zone into specific areas that interest me. Then once I have those specific areas, then it's time to go get boots on the ground and really scout it out, and then hike through there and look for, sign. Are animals present? What type of old rutting sign am I seeing? And then basically really start dissecting it at that point. So, Nick, will all the snow in the mountains affect your unit selection? Colorado has a huge snowpack right now, and I'm not sure how that will affect the hunt. No, it doesn't, because the snowpack, if the elk have a place to go to where they can winter well, they're going to be fine. They're going to go back up into those same rutting areas. Now, a couple of years ago when we had, Snowmageddon, it did affect the elk a little bit, because when the cows started dropping calves, the rivers were so swollen that they couldn't get across the river. So they didn't get up to their normal areas that they normally are. The bulls still followed the snow line up, but what we noticed was there was a little bit of delay for the bulls to go down and round up the cows and then come back up into their breeding area. They made it back up in there. I mean, heck, in fact, that was the first year that I had switched to a brand new area after all that happened, and man, I was amazed because brand new area, and we ended up, I think that first year got into 26, 27 different bulls, and that was a down year. So, so no, the snowpack really doesn't affect my unit selection too much. One of the additional steps that I would add to that is with that unit selection, I would get on the phone to the fish and wildlife biologist, and I would talk to them and ask them about calf mortality rate. That's going to be more on my mind than it is. So I want to know how well the herd survived. So how well the calves survived the winter. So now, obviously, if I get a bad report, that might make me kind of second guess that unit. But honestly, I always have backup plans. So I may still go into that first unit selection, give it a little bit of time, and then make an adjustment to go to plan B, C, D, E, F, or G, or whatever. So not really. They will move into that area by September. So Nick Stevens, in my opinion, they may just cause the elks to stay lower for longer until the snow melts and they can comfortably move higher. Yeah, that's exactly what happens. Because you got to understand, as that snow melts off, then the spring grasses start growing. And it's those new grasses that are chock full of nutrients. That's why the elk will follow that snow line up. So, so yeah, I mean, they'll be back up into that area. Now, the one thing you might see is, like I said, if it was a high calf mortality rate, you might see a little dip in numbers for a little bit, but they do rebound fairly quickly. So, speaking of maps, loved your tutorial on Cal Topo, specifically the sun layer. Absolutely brilliant. Bugle me this. Thank you. If you enjoyed that Cal Topo, make sure you go back in and watch the e-scouting tutorial that I uploaded 2 weeks ago. And actually this Friday, the third video in the e-scouting tutorial goes live on the Patreon page. So, LOL, that is my same incoming call I've got. So, okay. So I've noticed while doing research on Idaho Fish and Game, is it me or is it quite a bit of the southeastern part of the state more private land versus public? It kind of varies from area to area, but yeah, you get over there in that southeastern corner, and yeah, you can get a lot more tracts of private, surrounding some of that public. And in fact, that's that's the area that I was talking about over on that side of the state that these guys grabbed a tag for. So, I don't know. It's just research. Now the other thing that kind of stemmed this is, and I'm going to talk about a specific zone here. So, I have received messages from people and also seen several people post, and it always starts the same way. Holy cow, I was fortunate enough to get a sawtooth zone in Idaho. How incredible is this going to be? Okay, I hunted the sawtooth zone for years. And a couple of the individuals that messaged me and told me that, I don't think they were quite expecting the response that I got, or that I gave them, because I was honest. So, people seem to think that if it is a capped zone, that it is a trophy unit. The sawtooth zone can be far from the truth of being a trophy unit. The reason the sawtooth zone is capped is because the elk numbers are under objective. So they have to limit the number of tags and the number of elk harvested to try to bring that elk herd back up to objective numbers. It's not a quality tag. It's not a coveted tag. And in fact, bulls in that area, a really good bull in that zone is 265, 275. So it's not 360-inch monsters running around. The only thing that the sawtooth zone has is, because of the cap on the tags, it has a reduced number of people hunting it. So again, doing a little bit of research to find out why a certain zone is capped. A cap on a zone does not make it a quality trophy unit. If it was a quality trophy unit, it would be a draw. That is one thing that is important to understand. There is a difference between a capped unit and a draw unit. I know several people, non-residents, that have got the sawtooth tag, came over here and spent 10 days or more and never even saw an elk. It is rugged, rough, tough country. But also, too, there is that allure of hunting the Sawtooth Mountains. There is some wilderness areas in there that you can get. But also, too, the ruggedness and the wilderness make it tough for predator control. So now you have an increase in predator in those areas. So again, this is one of those things that doing a little bit of research and understanding why a unit is capped can make the difference, or mean the difference, of you having a highly successful, enjoyable hunt and spending all that money and coming out and having just getting beat by the mountain day after day after day. So, okay, okay, you guys have pumped in a lot of things. So, adaptations comes with conditions. You were correct, but the southern regions are also managed for quality over quantity, less public access, but more quality hunts. So, there's also an allure of that southeastern part of the state because, you can hunt elk in pines and aspens and junipers, and there's such a unique, diverse landscape over in that part of the state. I've looked at it a ton. But it's one of those things where sometimes it's hard for me to drive 4.5, 5 hours to go elk hunt when I can drive an hour from my house and get into some real quality elk hunting. So, delete second to last comment, bugle me this. So, would you recommend getting a guide for a first-time elk hunter, or just doing a lot of research like you were talking about and just go for it? So, Chris, that's completely your call. And you can also do a combination of the two. And what I mean by that is, so like I said, there's a lot of good free tools out there at your disposal. Fish and Game with harvest statistics, picking up the phone and talking to biologists. There's also Go Hunt, which Go Hunt has a ton of great information, for areas. I know here in Idaho, we have the Idaho Hunt Planner, which the information you can get from that is tremendous. In fact, I still need to get that tutorial done on that. But then it depends. Do you want to do a backcountry type hunt, or do you want to do a base camp truck style type hunt? It depends on what you want to do. And what I mean by you can do a combo of the two is you can do a lot of the research, and you can find areas away from roads to where you can go 3, 5, 7 miles back in or whatever, and hunt. And this is where you can do this combination, because you can find a guide or outfitter that can do a drop camp, which basically means they take you via horseback back into that area you found, drop you and your gear off, and then they come back to get you 7 days or however many days apart. So that is one way that, especially for being a first-time elk hunter, that you can enjoy the backcountry hunting, because backcountry hunting for elk is phenomenal. It is raw. It is, just the emotions and the adrenaline and just everything that you experience on that backcountry hunt is incredible, but also realize too the amount of work to get back there to make that possible. And that's where the use of a guide to do a drop camp is a great resource that can help you get back farther. Because I'll tell you what, your first time coming out elk hunting, I can guarantee as soon as you get out here, you're going to realize that the mountains in the area that you're hunting are a lot more rugged than what you thought they were. And that's where using a guide for a drop camp, you're going to save a lot more of that energy. So, okay. Another tool to use is the National Forest Service travel map. Onyx can lead you astray there because many roads and trails are only open part of the year. And that's kind of, Scott, one thing that we talked about a while ago with rugged maps. So, because the thing with Onyx and Base Map and this and that, these companies are always updating their map. You know, they're always saying, hey, we have the most up-to-date map. Well, when they update their map, a lot of those Forest Service roads that are old roads that are decommissioned then get pulled off that updated map. But if you're using something like Rugged Maps that has all that historical information, you can find road systems that won't show up on Onyx or Base Map that are great tools for getting in and out of areas. And I mean, we use old roads a ton, because you can move quickly and quietly on them, and you'll be amazed at the number of elk that also, and not just elk, but animals, period, that also use those old road systems to travel around. So really the key is not just one tool. You want to have a set of different tools: Rugged Maps, Onyx, CalTopo. There's also my favorite tool, which the Patreon members just found out about 2 weeks ago. Using a combination of all these tools, you can really find some great access points and abilities to move around within those areas that you're hunting. So, North Idaho, have you ever hunted the Panhandle? It's so thick, brushy, and steep. Curious if you've had any thoughts of this type of terrain. I have not hunted all the way up into the Panhandle, kind of the Elk City, Weippe, kind of that area is about as far north as I've hunted. I do have some friends that do hunt up in the Panhandle up in the thick, and they're successful, year after year. The thing about thick is, the animals are going to form trails through there. They are going to form routes to move around. And that's where time in an area year after year is beneficial, because that's one of the things about when we hunted the Sawtooth Zone. Sawtooth Zone is steep and thick, brushy. I mean, there's a lot of buckbrush. But we learned the trails. We learned those avenues that the elk were using to move around, and then we use those same trails to our advantage as well. So, bragging board. Finally, someone explained it. I don't hunt there because of low numbers. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I hunted Sawtooth for years. When I first started hunting it in early to mid 90s, it was a phenomenal unit. I mean, it was an incredible unit. We packed back in 7 miles. We had this great big long canyon all to ourselves. And I mean, we were routinely into 320, 330, all the way up to 350, 360 class bulls. And it was just incredible. And it changed. The introduction of the wolves and different things with that just really changed the landscape. Also, word got out, and then it just became popular and overhunted. It's still a place that it holds a special place in my heart. I mean, there's just something about areas in the Sawtooth that have a certain sight and smell to them that's just incredible. So, one day if the numbers ever bounce back, will I go back? I mean, we still found great success. I mean, we had hidden pockets that, we knew about. But because it became so popular, because people thought that because of this limited number of tags that it was a quality unit, that it just became just such a nightmare to try to get tags for. I mean, when they flip the switch on tag sales, and an area sells out in less than 5 minutes, I mean, it's just crazy. So Matthew, I feel like I could spend days looking at info on the internet if the wife wouldn't kill me first. No, and you certainly can do that, Matthew. When you first really start doing it, there's so much information out there that you can kind of get overwhelmed. But after time, you kind of start learning a few good resources, and it kind of starts winding and narrowing that down. So your searching and looking for info becomes more effective and more efficient. But the other thing with that too is, you know, by you doing that research and you coming up with that info yourself, it's all on you. Whether that hunt was a great success or a great failure, that's all on you. But whether it's a success or a failure, both of those are learning experiences. And that's the key there. That's what you need to take out of it, is that those are learning experiences. So, Scott, hey boss, good topic as I need to figure out where I'm going. Andrew Crud, got to plug in. So I started doing drop camps and it's been great. Nothing like getting back 10 to 12 miles and not killing myself to do it. Absolutely. And if you've never experienced riding horseback through the mountains back in to set up a spike camp, it is one of the coolest experiences that you will ever have. I mean, just the things that you see, and I mean, time spent on the back of a horse is incredible. I mean, I've been blessed to do it a bunch, and have seen some incredible country throughout Oregon and Washington and Idaho and Montana and Colorado, and yeah, it's one thing that I really, really recommend. And the nice thing about the drop camp too is they bring you in, drop you off, and then they bring the stock back out. So you can focus on your hunt. You're not having to worry about taking and tending to stock every day. So that is another really nice thing about it. So, Nacho, have you done a tutorial on how to use all the different tools, filters with OnX? Nacho, yes, that is actually the video that's dropping Friday in the Patreon page. And it's what the video is I'm going to, the tool that I discussed and did the tutorial on 2 weeks ago, I'm going to show you exactly how I take the information from that tool, get it into my OnX, so that way those areas I located with that tool are now in OnX, and then how I use the filters within OnX to even kind of, dwindle that down a little bit more. So, Jim, Elk City counts. Good. Okay. Yeah, Elk City was an interesting place to hunt up there. So, this is my 2 cents. If you are a first-time elk hunter and to include new to the unit, plan on spending a couple of years of vacation time looking over the area. Yes, that absolutely is. So, Peraz Mataz, good evening. How you doing? The one thing that I also hear from a lot of people is they will do the research. They'll pick a unit and then they'll go in for that hunt, and maybe that hunt didn't turn out the way they were hoping or the way they planned, and so they just give up on that area. Sometimes that's not really the case. I mean, yeah, if you go in there and you're not seeing any sign of elk, I mean, just it's completely void of any elk, then by all means go to a different area. But if you're getting into sign, there are elk there, maybe you need to spend a little bit of time learning how to hunt that area. How do the thermals work in that area? What are the wind currents? How do the elk move? Where are they feeding? Where are their bedding areas? Those are all things that take time to learn in an area. And not only that, but how to get into and out of a certain area the best way, to where you're really controlling your thermals and it's not affecting the elk. And because these are all things that if you're in a brand new area, it takes time to learn those. It takes time to figure them out. In fact, you guys heard me talk about last year when we ended up moving camp 25 miles, and Eric, one of my hunting partners, came by yesterday and we sat down and started talking, and we were talking about, everything that we were seeing on this one face that we were hunting, because we were getting into elk on this face every day, and we were just kind of bouncing things back and forth. And I said, God, with everything I'm seeing in there, I said, that is just, it's a travel corridor. They're not staying there. And so we pulled up the map and said, okay, if this is their travel corridor, they're coming from point A, where are they going? And we started looking at the map and changing the pitch so we could get a 3D view and turning it. And then all of a sudden, we happened to turn it just right. And here's this huge bench shelf about 3/4 away up the mountain that we didn't know what was up there, because we didn't have a ton of time when we moved camp to really hunt this area. And as soon as we saw that, we just looked at each other and got this smirk on our face and was like, huh, ding dong, we know exactly where they're going. So now we started dissecting that map. Okay, if we're coming from this direction or that direction, what's the best area to get in? Because these elk are moving through this corridor here, getting up to here, and yeah, we could work them on this face in this corridor, but if we don't get up to a certain point by a certain time, the thermals are going to change and our day's ruined. So, do we kind of hang off onto the side until they get to a certain point and then roll in? And so it was really, really cool. But that's one of those things. That's taking time in a couple of years to learn that area, to really learn how to hunt it. And I can guarantee that if you use some of these tools, you will find areas, even if it's an area that you've hunted for a long time, you will find areas that all of a sudden will stand out and go, holy crap, I never knew that was there. I gotta go check that out. So Andrew, great point. So Scott, need to do my research for a change instead of fumbling about as I've done in the past. Going to a unit with a few friends who are after deer hasn't worked out. At least hiking will be easier this year. Scott, you have absolutely been killing it with your weight loss. So extremely proud of you, brother. So Danny, glad wolves not yet infested here in Idaho or in Utah. That you know of, and they're coming everywhere. So Scott, I'm sorry, Danny, I hate to say that, but it's just kind of the reality of what groups are pushing for in a lot of areas. So the National Forest Service travel map will also keep you legal if you're looking at using your ATV trail to haul stuff in for a base camp, etc., with a quad. So yeah, absolutely, you have to do that. You're not only for the trails, but roads too, because there are some roads that are supposed to be closed during certain time of years, but gates get opened. So, and just because a gate's open, you're not aware that that road's supposed to be closed. If you get caught on a closed road, you can't say, oh, well, the gate was open. They're going to ask you, do you have the latest version of the travel map? So Lucas, good evening. Garrett, good evening. Sorry I'm late. Danny, one thing you can scout for, or the one thing you can scout for, is the amount of people who show up to that area. I think you mean that you cannot scout for. Yeah, you really don't know. And that's where sometimes, when we do our night bugling, when we jump in a truck, we're also scouting also to see how many people are in the area. Where are they camped at? Making mental notes of those. Then you learn year after year of, who, what, when, where, who's in what camp, how many people there are. And then you also, like I said, I've talked in the past that I'm not afraid to stop and talk to people, because then you start to find these groups that are, in that same area year after year in the same camp spot. Then you kind of figure out where they like to hunt. And by communicating, then, okay, hey, you guys keep your little pocket you've, hunted in for years. We're going to hunt this pocket over here. And it becomes that mutual respect where you honor each other's kind of buffer and area and be respectful. So Chris finally made it. Garrett, it took me 3 years to figure out a new unit and pattern and learn the elk. Still never killed a bull in that unit. Learned a lot since then, but changed units again. Back to a unit I hunted 10 years ago, back to my old stomping grounds. Now learning the new patterns and patterns, that's the fun for me. I love scouting and learning. The scouting and learning part is a lot of fun because it is that, piece of the puzzle that can be challenging, it can be fun, and you've done all this research, and then it becomes success, and just that level of pride that you feel from doing all that. It's just absolutely incredible. So BW headed west from Kentucky this year. Love all the info on your channel. BW, thank you very much. Best of luck on your Western adventures. So 10 years and no tag in Kentucky yet. Keep after it. So Kentucky's a state that I say the next world record is going to come out of. So just because of how Kentucky is, with the feed, the predator, the winters. I mean, it's a great recipe for, the minerals in the soils. It's a great recipe for good, healthy herds. And so that's what I'm waging my money on. The next world record is going to come out of Kentucky. Garrett, night bugles is the best scouting, very productive in my unit. Oh, absolutely. Night bugling is a vital piece to our hunt. In fact, that's what Eric and I were doing also is when we were looking at the map, was looking at other potential camp areas. Utilizing some of what's there and what's accessible. So Mountain Hunter Box, I was thinking maybe PA for world record. God, yeah. Pennsylvania might be another one. Yeah, I'll agree with you on that. So Pennsylvania or Kentucky. Be interesting to see. So, all right. Keaton, that's if you tell the truth. Small pockets of elk where we hunt. Nope, haven't seen. Yeah, and Keaton, there is that fine mix. Yes, I have done that before too. You can get a gauge when you're talking, to people. But yeah, there are a lot of times where we'll be like, no, we haven't seen an elk, we haven't heard a bugle, or any of that. It's just kind of a feeling you get when you're talking to people. But if you are hunting that same area year after year, and you see those same people, you kind of start to develop that relationship to where then you start kind of opening up and sharing that information a little bit. Lots of elk and elk hunters, or low elk numbers and low elk hunter numbers. So ultimately you want to, ultimately it would be great if you could find an area that has high elk numbers but low hunter numbers. But unfortunately, with the popularity of elk hunting growing, the number of hunters is increasing. So really for me, it's more so of good elk numbers and a good bull to cow ratio. Then I'm going to start looking for areas to where I can get away from people. So there are always ways that you can get away from people if you just think outside of the box. Sometimes it could be a motorcycle trail, having a motorcycle and hunt up motorcycle trails. We've hunted off motorcycle trails for years because it eliminates a lot of people. So the people that are going in on foot aren't going to go as far as you. The people on side-by-sides and quads can't go because it's a single track. So you can actually get into some great areas. But then also, too, on those motorcycle trails is have used mountain bikes on motorcycle trails. So, Nick, is there a particular terrain feature that you look for that isn't obvious? My biggest thing is benches. If I can find benches, 3/4 of the way up the mountain, especially on a northeastern facing slope, to me that is gold. Especially, within those benches, if you have springs and seeps and marshy areas, I mean, those are obvious areas that I look for. So, yeah, if I find benches with kind of in those criteria, oh yeah, I'm definitely going to hike in and check those areas. Danny, did you see Stephen Smith's post where he almost cut off his arm? Yes, I did see that. I haven't had a chance to talk to Stephen yet because I know that just happened today. So, very unfortunate. Don't know the extent of everything. They got everything sewed back together, but don't know long-term effects. We'll have to wait and see on that. So, Garrett, I am feeling Idaho and me shooting new world record this year. Garrett, I like it. I like it. Positivity, positive thoughts, and I wish you the best of luck with that. So, with all the rain this year in Arizona, it should be a great year for big bulls. Mike, actually not just in Arizona. I've actually been getting reports from some people that have been out and they're seeing bachelor groups that are already branched out to the 6th point already. So really, really, really good growth year so far all over the board. So, Paul, loose lips sink ships. Correction, Paul, loose social media lips sink ships. Yes. And when Paul, when I'm saying that I'll share some information with them, you're very, very rarely going to get true numbers from me of what we're seeing out there, especially if I know you, if you're a good friend. Yeah, you'll get good information because I know that you respect my spot just the way that I respect your spot. But if it's not, no, it's always downplayed. So, all right, guys, we are about 10 minutes out. So last round for questions. Lie online. You know what? If it's online, it has to be true because it's online. So, you guys are awesome. So, yeah, that's another reason why I don't jump into forums or chats, and that's why I'm not telling people to go into forums and chats and ask for information, because the information that you do obtain from forums and chat rooms, the percentage of truthfulness within a lot of those responses really wouldn't rely too heavily on a lot of those. So that's where phone calls to fish and wildlife biologists and fish and game agencies is a lot more beneficial. So, okay, so upcoming, I'm going to try to get up this weekend and film some videos. I don't know if I'm going to be able to. I'm still kind of on restrictions until about the 5th or on. But I am going to try to do that. And then here in 2 weeks, June 8th, we have that Elk Day at Alpine Archery and Fly in La Grande, Oregon. So if you're in Eastern Oregon or not too far from La Grande, make sure you get over there. I'm doing a seminar at noon. I think right behind me, Wayne Carlton's doing a seminar, but they have seminars all throughout the day. They have vendor booths, and at the end of the day, they have a wild game tasting event. So there's a chef that's going to be preparing a lot of different wild games. So it's going to be a lot of fun. We did just add another seminar to the schedule Friday, August 9th, Western Idaho. It will be at Archery Central in Caldwell, Idaho. We'll start at 6 or 6:30. That one there, it is $20 at the door. But definitely come join us over there. Just kind of a last minute tune up for the season and just have a little bit of fun. So, Garrett, with all the water, do you focus more on bedding areas? So, okay. So here's the thing to understand with, a heavy water year versus a low water year. The thing that you're going to find is when you have a high water year like we're having, this year, what that does is that puts a lot of feed out on the mountain, which means the feed is just dispersed. When you have feed dispersed like that, the elk are going to disperse. They're going to branch out a little bit more. So, instead of maybe going into a canyon where feed is concentrated because it was a low moisture year, where you have 5 or 6 bulls with their cows, their harems in there, now because there's more feed, they can kind of spread out a little bit more. So you may have to cover a little bit more ground going from group to group to group. But my focus still stays the same. I mean, I'm still looking for bedding areas. I'm still looking for feeding areas. It's a little tougher to find feeding areas or concentrated, dedicated feeding areas, because the thing that you'll find with the feeding areas is when that food is dispersed out, they may not go to the exact same feeding area each night. They'll kind of, wander a little bit more. And what they'll do is they'll graze a little bit in one area, then the next night they'll be in the same general vicinity, but they might be 300, 400, 500 yards away from where they were the night before. So that is one thing to keep in mind when you have a high moisture year, that there is a lot more feed out there. So on drier years, it's a little easier to find those nightly dedicated feed areas because that food is concentrated. So, Tony, ever have any confrontations with guides? Our scouting last year led us to several empty tree stands and trail cams left by local guides. No, I haven't. And in fact, that area in the Sawtooth that I used to pack in for several years, there was a guide. There was an outfitter in there, and actually I basically got to know them pretty well. Got to know the outfitters and the guides, and really built a good friendship with them. And so no, I've been pretty fortunate that haven't had the confrontation. So Victor, I'll be there. Good, looking forward to it. Scott, I'd like to taste some wild game. I'm kind of interested to see what they're going to have, Scott. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. So I know there's a lot going on that weekend, because I think the show at the Idaho Center is also that same weekend. But you could always go to that show at the Idaho Center on Friday, and then you could drive the 2.5 hours over to LeGrand for that day. So K. Grant, does more moisture mean more wallows as well? Certainly can, because some of those areas that may dry up as the summer goes along, that may not be a wallow. Yeah, in heavier moisture years, absolutely, you could certainly find more wallows than what you normally do. So, Joshua, sorry I missed most of the show, but love watching. Glad I caught the end. Joshua, hey, welcome. Glad to have you, bud. So, Just Samson, do you night bugle? Yes, I do. Night bugling is a tool that we use all throughout the year, and it's a tool that we rely heavily on. So, and most of the times when we're out night bugling, especially with the group that I hunt with, that is when a majority of the slapstick shenanigans take place. And a lot of those times that I'm really glad that the camera a lot of times stays in camp on some of those night bugling adventures. So, but maybe we will have to throw it in to get some of those documented. So, northeast benches, is that because they bed on northeast benches? You like those? Well, yeah. K. Grant, hold my beer and watch this. That line may have been said a time or two. So, it's just all about having fun. So, in fact, last year, we were heading to a night bugling spot, and 2 calves actually just jumped out of the trees right into the road in front of us. And we stopped, and we had the windows down, and one of the guys just popped the reed in his mouth and just kind of started, doing some pleading cow calls. And both those calves turned and just started walking right for the truck. And they were like, hey, get out, drop the tailgate, see if you can get him in the tailgate. Hey, easy way to get him back to camp. And so, yeah, the shenanigans that then proceeded to go on with that were quite entertaining. So, but yeah, Danny, the northeast benches can be really, really good bedding areas because the thing with those benches a lot of times is depending on the size of the bench, you can get some really, really inconsistent winds in them, and the winds really swirl, and so they just feel safe in those areas, for some reason. Plus, the thing that I found is a lot of times on those benches is you end up finding marshy areas that are wet with really good grass, but also places and they get in and wallow and roll around in the mud to cool off. It just Yeah, I've just had great success. But it depends where those benches are on the mountain. If those benches are down low, not so much. But if they're about 3/4 of the way up on the mountain, that's just from past experiences. Those have been kind of a golden zone to where I've always found a good majority of elk in a lot of places that I've hunted in different states. So, Andy, good night. Thanks for jumping in. So. Scott, it's hot in September and elk are wearing a fur coat. Northeast is the coolest bedding area in the hottest part of the day. So, yeah, but Scott, I think Danny was asking more about the bench aspect of it, not just the northeastern, but a northeast facing, bench. So, because they can actually get into places on that bench to where they can get a consistent wind coming behind them, but then out in front they kind of get this swirling effect, so they can actually cover a lot of ground with their noses. So 34, speaking of nighttime, what's your opinion of a campfire when back at camp? We'll have them. The smell of campfire, it doesn't affect. I mean, they're used to smelling campfires with people camping during the summer, forest fires and all that. But honestly, and I've said this time and time again, you're never going to be 100% scent free. So the more important thing is to play that wind and keep that wind in your favor. And if you're always keeping that wind in the favor, it doesn't matter if you've had a campfire every single night or if you haven't showered in 21 days, you're going to be okay. So if they're close enough to smell the smoke, you're not playing the wind right. Bingo. So Jeffrey Duncan, good evening. I bet wild game would be delicious. Scott, stop. So you have elk and bear and antelope, and you've got all kinds of wild game in your freezer. So the thing I'm interested in over there is the exotic. What outside of what we normally get to have here is what I'm interested in trying. That's the wild game I'm talking about. Sarcastic little sucker. All right. So, but yeah, so the videos that I plan on doing is, for the Patreon members, I'm going to set up the camera and I'm going to actually basically reenact a whole breeding sequence, and I'm going to have either Eric or Bryce out in the trees that are going to be acting like a bull, and I'm going to be interacting with them so that you guys on the Patreon page can see exactly how I do that breeding sequence and how I adjust my breeding sequence based on the responses that I'm getting back from that bull, kind of how I'm reading him, what he's given me, and how I'm going to adjust to respond to him. But also, too, I'm going to film that video on the peepless that I've been playing with. I know a lot of you guys are interested in this peepless method, but I want to really break it down and show you exactly how I'm doing this. I'll tell you this, though, it's absolutely incredible. It is just liberating and eliminates so much target panic. So, Kay Grant, I think the whole country would smell you if you haven't had a shower in 21 days. But you know what? If you're playing the wind, not a problem. So, all right, guys, countdown has begun. One more quick question. What are you doing this time of year in prep for season? Jesse, right now I am recovering from the surgery that I had last week. So right now I'm not doing much of anything. But when I get back into it, it's a lot of HIIT training, high intensity interval training, and also, hikes out in the mountains, setting trail cameras, scouting new areas, putting a pack on. I'll also put, pack on with some weight and just walk around the neighborhood during the week. So a few different things. So All right, guys, we got 30 seconds left. So thank you to each and every one of you for tuning in tonight. Hopefully you enjoyed tonight's show. As always, keep calling, keep practicing. Most importantly, though, have fun. And we will see you guys next week on the next episode of Wapiti Wednesday Q&A, brought to you by Elk Calling Academy. Have a great night, everybody. Good night, Lena. Thank you.